Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you guys are situated today. And thank you for joining us on a topic of managing quality processes utilizing Fusion Lifecycle. Today's intent is to show how Fusion Lifecycle can be leveraged to manage your different quality processes within your organization. This is going to be part one of a multiple series of webinars. As you know, quality processes, there's a lot of them out there for different things, and to try to cover them all in one meeting would be, or one webinar would be a little bit too much. Just a quick introduction. My name, again, is Pete Markovic. I'm a senior solutions consultant with Imaginit. I've been here about 6 years, going on 7 years. Prior to that, I was out in the industry working in different roles as an engineer, as a CAD manager, business analyst, IT project manager, and so forth. So I have a lot of experience with business process throughout the organization and how they all kind of work together, and as well as a huge focus on engineering and manufacturing. So today's agenda, I'm going to start out with a few slides just to kind of introduce you to Imaginit and Fusion Lifecycle. We'll talk about a little bit about quality and what we see as some of the challenges out there in the industry, and then how we can leverage Fusion Lifecycle to accomplish or to manage some of those challenges. The demonstration, I will go a little overview of Fusion Lifecycle, so if you guys are familiar with the product, there will be some repeat there. For those of you that have never seen the product before, I want to make sure everybody has a little bit of an understanding of its capabilities outside of even just the quality area. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So just a quick slide on Imaginit Technologies. We are a division of a company, Rand Worldwide. There's 3 major divisions within the Rand Worldwide. The one that I work for is Imaginit Technologies, which is a platinum partner with Autodesk. We also have Rand 3D that specializes in some other software packages and training, PTC products, Dassault products, and so forth. And then Ascent is our other division within the Rand umbrella that does all of the training manuals that you probably have used if you've done any Autodesk training for AutoCAD or anything like that. We specialize in consulting. You know, we definitely are a software company, selling software, but I work in the services industry, or the services division, specializing in the consulting, and then I specialize primarily in the PLM and the PDM space. So if you're working with Autodesk Vault, you may have worked with me in the past. That's another area that I work a lot with. We are a turnkey solution provider, meaning, you know, like I said, we can buy the software through us. We would provide the implementation, training, and even support throughout the process of the implementation. We have approximately about 40 offices across the North America, between the United States and Canada, with roughly about 200 technical resources working within those different divisions, as you know, for manufacturing, the architectural, and the civil areas. Most importantly, though, we are a Fusion Lifecycle certified partner. So in order to do implementations of Fusion Lifecycle, you do need to get certification through Autodesk, which what that encompasses is ongoing training with Autodesk, going through what they call a boot camp, get the initial training. We have to have a proven implementation process, how we bring Fusion Lifecycle into your company. We have a methodology that we use to do that called the Take Aim, which again, we've used it with our other products if you've worked with us in the past on some of those. So what is PLM? Well, by definition, it's Product Lifecycle Management. It's been around for quite some time now. I'd say probably 15 years, maybe a little bit longer, that you started to hear about it. It's maturing, or still is maturing. It's probably not as mature as CAD or PDM, but it's really a theory of managing your business around people, processes, and data, and how you integrate those together. So it's using a technology platform, in this case Fusion Lifecycle, to take and integrate those 3 pieces of your business. But the product lifecycle management, of course, is your products, you know, from cradle to grave, as we a lot of times talk about, or in this case, from plan to disposal. Different terminologies. If you were to go Google PLM, you'll find probably, you know, hundreds of different definitions. But think of it as, you know, integrating these people, processes, and data. and using the technology stack to do that. Today we're going to be focusing on quality. And if you look in this diagram, quality shows up over there in kind of the build area under, where manufacturing and purchasing and so forth, but really quality is throughout your whole organization. So this slide really doesn't depict that, in across the whole entire enterprise and throughout all your different business processes. So think of, quality is everybody's responsibility, right? And we'll talk about that here in just a few minutes. So manufacturing quality is really twofold in the manufacturing environment. We have product quality, which Fusion Lifecycle can help you with. That's, our deviations, our nonconformances, our problem reports, things like that. Then we also have process quality, right? That's what we're going to be focusing a little bit more on today with audits and findings. Supplier audits, things like that are going to be more process-driven. They're not necessarily product-driven, although supplier audits are somewhat going to be product-driven, back to nonconformances and so forth. But the thing to understand that all of these processes are generally connected in some way, shape, or form, and a lot of times we'll go back to the product or go back to the item number. Now, this slide, I wanted to throw that out there because pretty much all of these different areas throughout quality come built into Fusion Lifecycle. There's a workspace for most of these. The one that's not there, that's in there, is the audits and findings, which is what we're going through today, is actually something that I built out, but I wanted to do that to show the ability and flexibility of Fusion Lifecycle and how it can be utilized, in your business processes. So let's talk about how these processes are connected. Now, this is more product quality. But it's important to understand that these things aren't disparate. They're not disconnected, right? We have generally the core of any PLM system is going to be your items and BOMs or your part numbers. And what happens to those throughout their product life cycle, right? After we've designed and developed them and they're in manufacturing, well, sometimes we'll have a thing happen, a nonconformance, right? And what we want to do is we want to make sure we feed that part number, that item master, that item information into that process, okay? By having them in the same system and having these workflows all interconnected, it gives us the ability to do that. So a lot of times we kick something off in our quality processes as little as a nonconformance. Something came in, didn't conform to print, and so forth. Well, from there, we may develop a CAPA, corrective action, preventive action. When we do that, we can spawn that workflow from our nonconformance into our corrective action workflow. This enables us to pass information that we've already entered. What was the issue? What was the part number? And so forth, so that we don't have to consistently repeat and re-enter that information. From our corrective action, we may need to do a deviation. So throughout our CAPA process, we've determined, well, we can't stop production. We need to be able to accept these parts in. We can do that, even if they're not to print, we can write up a deviation and bring those in. So again, those processes are being connected. We can pass that information from our corrective action into our deviation. After we've determined what maybe the root cause is and what we're going to do to resolve that, it may lead us into change management, right? And so from our corrective action, we can spawn into our change management processes, either writing an ECO or an ECN, and again, passing that information over to that workflow. From there, it's a closed loop. We want to make sure we're feeding that information back into the items as well as back into the corrective action plan, all right? How are we going to prevent this in the future? Well, we did this through change management and so forth. So really good quality processes are closed loop. I mean, we all understand that and know that. Similar to change management, we always want that loop, that feedback loop back into engineering, back into our quality department and so forth. And Fusion Lifecycle will help us achieve that. So what's some of our typical quality management tools that we see out there? Well, if you're lucky and you have a QMS system, that's great. There's a lot of companies that do have QMS software. That software is generally designed and specific to doing quality processes. But what we see is a lot of customers don't integrate that. They don't integrate it into either their ERP systems or their PLM systems or PDM systems, and so they're disparate. A lot of re-entering and keying of information. We already have our part numbers in our bills of materials and that information in other systems, and we need that information in these downstream quality processes as well. So if you have the QMS software, that's great, but the next step would be to integrate that. If you don't have QMS software, well, PLM can fill that space as well. But we most likely or most often see a lot of our quality processes are managed through spreadsheets. And how do we deliver those spreadsheets? How do we communicate that information is a lot of times via email. And we all know what the different complications there are. Are we working on the latest document? Did we notify the people that need to be notified? Is stuff in people's inboxes we don't have access to, and so forth? So not a very efficient system to do quality management with, but we do run across that quite often. And then, where do we store this information? Well, maybe on a network share. Well, that's great if we have access to it, but not everybody always has access to the different network shares, and it burdens your IT department to go in and figure out, who needs access and so forth. So having a system that gets the information to the right people at the right time and with the right permissions is critical. And that's something that Fusion Lifecycle can do. So what are some of the business challenges that we see around quality? Well, again, disparate quality management processes and solutions. There's been, QMS systems have been around for quite some time, and companies have implemented them, and again, they're usually siloed. They're sitting over there not connected to other things. A lot of times we don't close the loop. Quality's off doing their thing, doing a great job, but not all of the time does that information necessarily get back into engineering. And as we're designing and developing new products in our industry or in our area, we need to be aware of what's going on. If we've got some problems that are happening on our existing products, we certainly don't want to design those flaws into our new products. So closing that loop, getting that information back through a change management process back into the items is very critical. Another challenge that we see a lot is just the lack of resources and time. Executive leadership doesn't always understand that, quality isn't free. It doesn't just happen. It requires work, and it requires resources to do that work, and it requires time to do that work. And so it's one of those things that's not always in the forefront, and it should be. It's obviously very important to every business, and if you ask every executive out there, they'll say, yeah, quality is our major focus, but sometimes when you ask the people that are implementing those processes and going through those processes, they feel like they don't have enough time to get their job done. And so what Fusion Lifecycle can do is help free some of that time up, make these processes more efficient, being smarter with the time we have. Don't doing more work with the same amount of people. And then another thing is complex processes. Maybe you've got some regulatory requirements, whether it's environmental, whether it's regulatory, or medical. There's companies out there that have very complex quality processes, and others that aren't as complex. Well, the nice thing about Fusion Lifecycle is it's able to do both. We can implement some very simple workflows. We can go very complex. And in this case, what I'm going to show you today is a little more on the probably medium complexity type of thing, meaning that we have multiple workflows, different workspaces to accomplish this overall process of doing audits. Maybe in your business you only need to have one workflow. Maybe that's sufficient. Again, the nice thing about Fusion Lifecycle is that it's scalable. It can be implemented into different industries and different businesses to support your needs. And then one of the last challenges I mentioned here is, again, business silos. Quality is everyone's responsibility. So it's not just one department. It's not just engineering. It's not just your quality department, not just manufacturing. It's everybody working together. And one way to get everybody working together is to get everybody working into one system. Okay, so today, what I'm going to show you in Fusion Lifecycle, again, this is just the beginning of a part 1 series, or quality series, is what I call a quality audit, okay? And from there, we're going to have a workflow for that overarching audit, and we're going to go into findings, which, hopefully we don't have a lot of those, but, that's the reality is we find things within our audit, we have to record those. They have a workflow of their own in this environment. And then from our findings, we can actually develop tasks and assign them to people to go off and do things. Maybe it's to do a research of the root cause or update some documentation or provide some training of some sort. Then those tasks, when they're completed, feed back into the findings as being completed, which then rolls back up into the quality audit and allows you to close out that audit. Now, somewhere in there, usually in the findings area, we will have the ability to generate a CAPA. Okay. Now, we're not going to go through that today. That's going to be part of the Part 2 series, is the corrective actions, because that's obviously the heart of a lot of quality, and we're just kind of leading up to that. But you'll see in there there's a place for that to happen. We're just not going to go down that path today. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and shut that down and jump over to Fusion Lifecycle. Again, for those of you that have not seen Fusion Lifecycle, I'm just going to go through kind of a really high-level general overview of what it is. So Fusion Lifecycle is a PLM software, sits in the PLM space for Autodesk. It is a software as a service software, so it's completely in the cloud, meaning there's nothing to install at your site. There's no databases that you need to manage. There's no server architecture that you have to build out and manage. It's all done for you. You basically just purchase a subscription license to access a website, and you just need a web browser, and any of the web browsers will do. In this case, I'm using Chrome. With that, then that means, you know, it's a really easy thing to implement. I wouldn't say easy, but a relatively short implementation time, because we don't have to, like I said, set up all the servers and things like that. Low cost entry. There's not the, you know, $20,000, $30,000 server purchases and things like that just to even start the project. So it's very low cost barrier for people to get into PLM. And using other PLM systems before I came to Imagine it, I have some experience with some of the others. This system is just very configurable, but the time that we can get a customer up and working is really beneficial. There's not the, you know, 3, 6, 7, 8 month plan. It's literally within a few weeks we can have you working within your workflows and getting some benefit back out of the system. So with that, like I said, it's a software as a service. All you need is a web browser. When you log into Fusion Lifecycle, you're brought to the home page. And, you know, to come back to that home page, there's a little home button up there. Because it's a web page and because we're all used to surfing the internet and we all understand how to navigate, the training to learning Fusion Lifecycle is minimal. We spend more time training users on their processes and how those processes interact with each other than it is to actually use the software. I mean, we all understand, you know, when we mouse over something and it turns into a hyperlink, you know, if we click on that, we expect some sort of action to happen. So from a usability perspective, training is relatively minimal. When we come to this home page, everybody's home page is going to look a little bit different because it's based on my profile. When I'm logged into this, we have this My Outstanding Work that's like front and center, right in the middle of the page. And this is an important aspect of Fusion Lifecycle because we're talking about workflow, and we don't want workflow to sit, right? We always want to make sure people are doing the things that they need to do. We want to make sure people are aware of the things that they need to do. You know, we often hear that, well, you know, I threw this over to Joe, but Joe didn't do it. And you talk to Joe, and Joe's like, well, I didn't know I needed to do it. Or, you know, the email came in, and he didn't see it or something, you know, kind of thing happens. Well, with Fusion Lifecycle, we can set this up with enough reminders and escalations and things and so forth that there's really no excuse for not knowing that you're to be performing work. The first thing here is this My Outstanding Work. It shows me what in the system right now is waiting on me, okay? And there's, of course, a few different things in here. Some of these, as you see, have a date. You know, this thing is due on June 9th. This is an audit task. I've got the green flag, meaning I'm not late yet. As this date approaches, I can set up like maybe 3 days out. That will go to yellow. That's starting to warn me. Maybe once obviously when I hit June 10th and I'm not done with this task, it will go to red. So we give people prioritization of what they should be working on, okay, based on, you know, however we've set up the system. Not everything has to have a due date. And again, this is just the flexibility of Fusion Lifecycle. So I have some things in here. These are still things that I need to accomplish within Fusion Lifecycle, but there's not necessarily a due date. Now, we could put due dates on it, but again, not everything has to be one way or the other, very configurable. Some other things in here I won't spend too much time on. We can create hyperlinks or bookmarks back to different records within the system. Fusion Lifecycle has the ability as a document management system to be able to attach documents to records. So we can attach PDFs, Excel files, Word documents. Really any kind of file can be attached to a record within Fusion Lifecycle. When we do that, if you guys are familiar with a PDM like Autodesk Vault, we have the ability to check out documents and check them back in. So if we check them out, make a change, check it back in. While we have it checked out, other people can't be making modifications and so forth. So we have document management in here as well. A couple of the other things is just the recently viewed items and so forth. I'm going to hit the dashboard here in just a little bit later in my demonstration. But and then, of course, we have the ability to search Fusion Lifecycle. Google-like search capabilities. It'll search the entire environment, find different instances of a keyword, and then you can go from there to determine what record you want to look at. If we look at the menu system across the top, our main menu here, it's broken up however we decide, okay? This is based on maybe different business areas. What I'll tell you is from here, product development down to reference, this is basically out of the box. So this is the way, if you were to purchase Fusion Lifecycle tomorrow, these are the different workspaces that you would receive. And just to give you a little background, a workspace is generally a different process. Doesn't have to be, not every workspace has to have a process or a workflow. In those cases, a lot of those are down here as references. They may just be a list of records. And I have a workspace. I'm going to show you an example of that. But a lot of times these represent different processes. So like our products workspace, that's our NPI, new product introduction, new product development. We have an items and bombs workspace. Under change management, we have problem reports. We have deviations, change requests, change orders. Under supply chain, we have suppliers. Notice we have audits here, but those are supplier audits. We're not going to talk about those. We're talking about quality audits. Customers. Under quality, you do get a non-conformances workflow and workspace. You get a corrective action one, and you get an RMA one. Now, this tenant that I'm using, we call them for tenants. That's the one that's been assigned to me, or this site. This one is a little bit older than what is being provided today, and there are some additional workspaces that are now coming in quality. There's one for FEMEA. There's a supplier quality audit that's a little bit different than this one. And so there are a few more things. Autodesk is trying to start their customers out with as much out of the box as they can. And in some cases, it'll work great for some companies, and other companies need to go in there and just tweak what's existing and what's there. Again, for this demonstration, I built out a new area. I called it quality processes, and I created these what we call workspaces, again, 4 different ones. I have one for audits, one for findings, one for tasks, and then this one is, again, just a reference workspace for our ISO documents, okay? We do have onboard or reporting capabilities. It comes as part of the software. We can do imports. So if we have a whole bunch of records that we need to bring in, we can import them via Excel. So items, bombs, things like that can be done, as well as exporting out. So if we need to get data out of the system or data into the system, you know, Excel is kind of the jackknife of software. It can do a lot of different things. And certainly we utilize it here for doing updates of data and importing and exporting. Users have capabilities of doing delegations, which is always a very nice feature, right? If I'm going to go out of town for the next week, I don't want workflow to be stuck. I don't want people to be, you know, upset that I took a vacation to the Bahamas and things are sitting here. So before I leave, I can go ahead and delegate my tasks and the work that it gets assigned to me while I'm out of the office to someone else. Probably best to go check with that person before you delegate. But workflow doesn't get stuck that way. So as I'm out of the office, things get assigned to me. They will go to that other person. That other person then can work on my behalf. They inherit my permissions just for those records and only those records. And if they do perform any workflow, then it's also noted in the system that they did that on my behalf. So traceability is a very big key issue, especially for, again, highly regulated companies, things like that. They want to know who did what and when and so forth. Okay, so that's just kind of a real brief overview of Fusion Lifecycle. I want to make sure we have enough time here at the end to take on any questions. So I'm going to go ahead and move into the actual demonstration of some of the things that I've done here for quality processes. So I just opened up different tabs across the top here in Chrome. You can certainly, you know, click on and things and navigate around. Oops, I didn't mean to hit that button, but we can do that. But I just opened them up to just make them a little faster. So this took me right into a workspace that's called ISO sections, all right? This one, again, is a workspace that doesn't have workflow. It's just a list of my quality documents. So if you have an ISO manual, probably a Word document or something like that, stored somewhere, how do you manage that and so forth? In this case, what I've done is I've taken that ISO material and I've broken it out into different sections and I've created records for each one of those. Of course, I pick one that's not really exciting. Let me pick one. Here we go. So in this case, this is 7.6. It's product realization. It's control, monitoring, and measuring devices. And then here's the information that belongs in that ISO body. So this is in there so that when I start doing my audits, I can tie it back to what are we auditing, or where did we find our findings? You know, what section of our ISO material did we violate? And then at the end of this, you'll see is I can start running reports on that, and I can see, well, you know, we're having some really big issues with traceability or whatever. What are we seeing trending and things like that? So again, I just wanted to precursor that, what this workspace looks like. It's just a simple workspace. Doesn't have a whole lot of things going on to it other than just a collection of records. Okay. This next workspace is our Quality Audits workspace. And again, find it up here. I just happen to have it open already. When we come into these workspaces, we're showing a list of all of the records in here. Now, each user can come in here and modify their views. So if I want to see, well, let's say, who's the lead auditor on each of these audits that's going on, I can simply add that for my sake. So each user can set up these different views. They can have multiple views. In this case, I just have one. But we can have different views for different things. And that's really common for most companies. Certain people in different business areas want to see different data and see them differently. But it's just a way that we can sort and look through things. Now you can see I'm the lead auditor on all these. You know, I would expect that because I don't have anybody else working in here. But so any of those fields are added, or able to be added. And right now we have 6 audits in here. I didn't get a lot of data set up in here. You know, and obviously that affects sometimes your reporting, right? Is if we don't have a huge data set, then what we can do on reports and things like that is a little bit limited. But I did get a few of them set up in here. And what I want to do, though, is actually go through the whole process. I don't think it's going to take us too long. And that way people can see, you know, what's all involved. Now, it may look like a lot is happening, and it certainly is. Okay, there's a lot that's been automated, and we're putting in, you know, validation into our process to make sure that we don't do things that we don't want to do and do things that we make sure we want to do. But keep in mind when you're seeing this that, you know, it doesn't all happen in this kind of framework, right, or in this amount of speed. You know, audits obviously take more than 10 minutes. But to create a new record, simply come in here. All of the fields of information that are in here was configurable by us, by me. What I want to see in here is totally my choice. So I've created, the first thing here is I want to put in a description. So maybe this is going to be a quality audit. Quality seems to audit themselves quite often, and that's a good thing, right? And first thing I want to choose here, is this an internal or an external? Okay, I'm going to say it's an internal audit, meaning we're doing it ourselves. You know, when are we performing it? You notice we have all sorts of different field types. I don't remember, I think there's like 16 or 18 different field types that we can choose. So if I have a date field, I set it up as a date field. If I need drop downs, I can create list of values, just like this is over here. So again, what metrics I might want to report on later would be the things that I'd want to capture here. This is kind of what we call the item details or the record details. Think of it as an item master for this particular audit record. Who am I auditing? Well, the guy in quality I'm going to audit, and I'm going to go ahead and be the lead auditor. And if I have other auditors that are helping me, I could select them. Again, this is just the workflow that I chose. It doesn't mean that's what, you know, maybe you only have one person running an audit, but maybe you have a team of people, and we can record that. And then it's later down in the workflow, we need to review our audit results. So I'm going to put myself on there for that. Go ahead and save it. And we just created a new record. Pretty easy to do. I mean, again, pretty intuitive, plus sign, new record, users are off and running. Now, once we've got this record created, you notice we have now some new tabs across the top. We have a workflow, we have some findings, we have an attachments tab, and we have a change log. This is configurable by workspace, what tabs we need. Each tab can do a little different function. Obviously, workflow is a workflow tab, attachments tab is attachments, but not every workspace needs to have all of these things, so we can configure it based on your needs and keep the interface nice and clean so that users aren't confused by things. If I look at the workflow, what's really nice in Fusion Lifecycle is this graphical, Visio-like, I call it, visualization of your workflow. This really helps in training and onboarding new employees. You know, it's like people had to read through this in a document, this happens and this happens and this happens. It's kind of boring. It's maybe hard to visualize, but when we see it in this kind of format, we can see, oh, hey, we're here. We're in the initiate state. We're going to go to planning, then execution, and so forth. We see what that workflow looks like. And it really helps, you know, people know, well, when I get done, when I push this to plan, you know, when I say, okay, I'm ready, where's it going, right? Now, what we can also do in these workflows is we can drive workflow based on decisions. So notice here, it's going to planning. That's my green arrow. So what these green arrows mean are those are the things that I can execute. I can't go here to report findings. But if I go back to this audit and I say, well, you know what, this ends up being an external audit. We didn't get it done, so we're gonna hire an external consultant to come in and do it. If I go back and look at my workflow, you'll see it changed. Based on some logic rules that we put into these workflows, it says, hey, if it's external, we're not going to do a planning and execution because someone else is doing that externally. We're going to go right to report findings. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to go ahead and execute it. I can just click right on that arrow to execute it, or I can go up here and execute it. There's a couple different ways to execute workflow. I'm just going to hit Save Step, and then that moves the workflow. Now, all the time that this is happening, there's emails that are being sent to let people know that they have work to be done. So I'm just going to open up an email here real quick and just let people know. You can see I got an email when it first was created. This is a system-generated email. So these are free. These are right there out of the box. When anything happens, the next person that has workflow to do, they get notified. And it tells them, hey, you know, Pete did this action on this workspace, and here's what's available to you, you know, the next person in line. He can either, you know, push it to this or do that. So the notifications are already there built in. And we can also do custom ones, and I'll show you one of those here when we get to that point. Another thing I just wanted to point out is we can put notes right in the workflow. Again, I'm thinking of from a training perspective, you know, anytime we need to implement software, there's always that training aspect of how do we get everybody, you know, on board. And then on top of it, the onboarding process of bringing new employees in. How do we keep them up to date? We can put notes in it. It tells us right here, enter the findings on the Audit Findings tab and then submit it to the Address Findings. If there is not any findings, submit it to Review. So right now we can see there's no findings, so the only arrow we have here is the Review. One thing I also want to point out is this is our mobile client for this, so you can run this on a tablet or a phone. So right now we're in the Report Findings. This is maybe when, you know, as an external auditor or something like that, we're doing the audit itself. We could pull this up on our tablet as we're doing the audit, and we can put in our findings as we find things. I'm just going to go and use Chrome here. I'm going to go to the Audit Findings tab. And I'm going to say, okay, we did make a finding. So I'm going to say Add, and we found that documentation is out of date. Okay, whatever we want to capture there. And which section did it belong to? And again, you know, we need to know which sections, and we can add the description here as well. But right now, it's just, you know, I know which section it is. Is this a major, minor, or observation? Again, think of reporting. You know, we want to know what our type of finding is. So that's a pretty major one, I think, and it's currently going to be opened. All right, and I'm going to create a finding for that. So I'm going to check that box, hit Save. Now I can put as many findings in here as I need. There's no limit. I'm just adding different rows to this tab. But if I go back and I look at the workflow, notice now it's changed, right? Now that we have a finding, going straight to review, again, not acceptable. We have to actually go in and address the finding. So I'm going to go ahead and execute that workflow. Now I'm doing all of this as the lead auditor. We can control who does what when. So, you know, if you have different people that need to be involved in different steps of your process, that's certainly something that Fusion Lifecycle handles it very well. So now we're in the address findings. If I go back to my findings tab, we'll notice one thing. We now have a finding record, and it looks like a hyperlink here. Okay, that's because it is. It created a new record in another workspace. Okay. Another thing to just point out is that finding's open right now. Well, what happens if I decide to push this to review? I get a little antsy. It's not going to let me. Okay. We want to validate or enforce, not validate. We want to enforce the process that we said we're going to live with. And our process says we cannot review this audit until all the findings have been addressed and closed. So again, we'll stop people from doing things that they shouldn't be doing. Okay? Now, one nice thing about Fusion Lifecycle is we can build all this linkage in so that we can easily navigate from one record to another. So I'm in the audit. If I want to go down into the finding, I can just simply click on that hyperlink, and it takes me into the findings workspace. So actually what I'm in is I'm in this workspace now, and I see that right up here. So users always know where they're at. Notice the tabs changed. Okay, different workspace, different needs. Look at all the information that's already filled out for me. I brought over the description of my audit. It's an external, when it's performed. If I look at it, none of that information is editable. Doesn't need to be. It came from the audit. So we can control what people can change and not change and so forth. We look at this workflow. A little simpler workflow. Again, they don't all need to be complex or 50 states. They can be simple like this, where right now we're in the open state. We did put a note in here. It says, go ahead and create the tasks on the task assignment tab and then run the create tasks when we get into that state. So if we come back here, take a look at this, there's, what information do we need to still fill out? Well, maybe we don't know, okay? Maybe we just think, okay, let's go ahead and put it to in progress and again, save it. Well, we get a little dialog pops up and says, hey, you better tell us how you plan to fix this and what the root cause is. So again, as the lead auditor, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say, what's our plan? Well, update the document. I'm sure it's that easy, right? And what's the root cause? Root cause was lack of training. That's usually what's the root cause of most things, right? So go ahead and save that. What that allows us to now do is get past that workflow stop. So again, where I'm at right now is to move it into finding in progress. Go ahead and save that. So what it wants me to do is create a task, similar to what I did in the audit. I'm going to come in here, and this can be templatized too. We do that a lot of times for customers. Well, maybe we don't want to have to manually even fill this out. We can fill this out and automate a lot of that. So I'm going to assign this to me, and my description is going to be to update the documentation. If I could spell, but that's okay. Yeah, I better spell it right. I don't like, hey, this is quality, right? We want to make sure we have quality information. Okay? When do we want this to be due? Well, I'm going to give Pete till the 20th to get it done. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And then in thinking back to our instructions, once I've created that, then I need to go in and say create tasks. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. This is called an action script. So we're running a script manually right now to go off and create that. And you see it checked the box for me, told it was created. We have a project management tab in here that shows us the workflow for that particular task. It's in progress, and then when it's complete and when it's due. We go back here and I update, well, I didn't even need to do that. It happened right away for me. Take a look at my outstanding work. I now have the task here on the 21st that's due, okay? As well as I got notified via email, all right? Go back in here, and if I go and click on this link to take me into the task itself, remember, I'm traversing 3 workspaces. I went from the audit to the finding, and now I've got tasks. And I might have, maybe I have 10 tasks that need to be done for that finding. I would have just added those other 9 and assigned them to whoever needs to be assigned to them. But again, we passed that information on. All that information was automatically created from us and fed down from the audit. If I look at this workflow, again, simple workflow. We don't need anything more than this. It's just a task. It's in progress, and when I'm done, I hit complete. And if I hit complete, it's probably going to bark at me that I didn't do something. So I need to tell it, well, what did I do? So I'll come back in here, and my implementation description is conducted training on 04, what is today, the 6th. So I did some training today. Go ahead and save that. Maybe I have something I need to attach. I didn't really go through that, but you notice on all of my workspaces, I almost always will turn on the attachments tab. This gives me the ability, again, to attach any kind of file. Maybe that's a sign-up sheet when I conducted the training, and I want to attach that. I have record now. I have traceability to go back and say, hey, Pete, did you really provide that training? Well, yeah, here's my sign-up sheet. It's attached to this record permanently, okay? Things like that, oops, I want to go back into the workflow, are very nice to have. And again, we have a change log that's keeping track of every time this record changed. We can go back and see what changed about it. I'm going to go ahead and complete this. All right, now it let me complete it. It's all happy. If I go back to the task details, you notice we have links to go right back to the finding. Again, I could have them open in other tabs, but I'm just going to go ahead and follow my way back up. Now that I've completed the task, I come back in here and I look at my project management task. You'll see it's completed 100%. If I look in my assignment, you'll see it's recorded the completed date already for me. But look at it, it also brought in the implementation description. So as the lead auditor, I don't even need to go down into the task. I can come back here and I can say, oh, okay, it says they conducted training on this. The other nice thing is this is where we have these custom emails. This email got sent to the lead auditor as soon as that task was completed. It's a little bit different. I control what verbiage we put here, but I said, hey, the audit task, blah, 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 for audit, blah, 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 is complete. And then I also gave the lead auditor a link that if they click on that, takes them right to that audit task, and they can go in and they can read the attachment if they want and so forth. So again, it's all about connecting all these things, right? Now, in order for me to close out the finding, okay, I have two choices here. I can close this with a kappa or just close it. And again, this is, you know, relative to what do I need to do. Maybe this finding, that was the outcome, right, is we need to do a corrective action. So if I take this path, it's going to close out the finding, and it's going to generate a corrective action for me automatically over in the corrective action workspace. And again, it's going to transfer all this information that I found in the audit. We're not going to do that today. That's going to be part of part two. But if I just go ahead and close this without a kappa, notice again, we have some validation going on, and it says, well, you need to put in the implementation and effectiveness. So the implementation is training was done. Now, we could have transferred that over here, but in case there's multiple tasks, which implementation notes do you put in here? Now, I guess we could have even compiled them together. That's something that maybe I'll do later. And effective, maybe we're going to review in 6 months to see if this has been effective or not. Okay, so go ahead and save that. And again, I can run my workflow from here, or I can go back into the workflow, but I'm going to say go ahead and close this. So I've closed out my finding. Now, again, I can link right back up to my quality audit, and when I go back up here and I take a look at my findings tab, you'll see it's all been recorded. It's been closed, the day it got closed, and so forth. Okay. Now I should be able to move this into the review state. I'll say, okay, we're ready for review. Now, in this case, I could have had multiple reviewers on the team, and if you look back at the state of this, or the details on this, there's only one, okay? It's just me, because I'm the only one in here. If I had multiple people in here, this would sit here until everybody's approved it. Everybody would get notified, and the last person to go in and make that approval would go in and click on this. But since there's only me, I can go ahead and say final approval and close this. Now notice, hey, password's required. That's something we can set up too and say, well, you know, we need to revalidate that this is Pete doing it. And put in a password. That's very common in highly regulated industries to require passwords on approvals. And there you go. We've closed out this audit. Now, again, it seems like a lot of steps and a lot of things are moving and going on, but I mean, think about what we're accomplishing there. We've got audits happening. Within those audits, we have findings. Within those findings, we have tasks to address those findings, okay? Now, how all that works is, or comes back up into some sort of reporting, is underneath the reporting dialog here, we can create custom reports, and we have different outputs. We can run them as HTML, which just is going to display that information on the screen. We can export them out as Excel spreadsheets, or in some cases, we can actually even make charts out of them, depending on how we set up the report and so forth. Now, I did throw a couple reports on here, pretty simple, but under my dashboard, when I open that up, what that does is it goes and generates all of these charts in real time. So we're not looking at static information. We're not looking at something that happened yesterday. This was real time, what's going on in our system. And as a quality manager, I can pick which reports or which charts show up here. In this case, quality audits in progress, audit findings, maybe the CAPAs, NCRs. If I'm in engineering, maybe I care about NPI. You know, what products are being developed right now per family, and where are we at in the open new product introductions and so forth. So if I click on this, you'll see we don't, you know, it's not too exciting because it's 4 things. So we got 4 things going on. We have 1 in the planning state, 1 in the address findings, 1 in the review, and 1 in the report findings. That's just our current quality audits in progress. So, you know, as a manager, if I'm like, hey, you know, what audits are in progress right now? What do we got people working on? Real quick access to that information. Now, if I want to look and see, well, what are we finding out there? Well, you can see we're finding a lot of violations against 4.2.1, right? We've had 4 of them. Compared to some of these others. So now that we have that information in this system, we can start mining it for trends and for KPIs and things like that that we want to know about regarding our quality and our processes. Okay? I know that's a lot, and I tend to kind of go through it a little bit quickly. Hopefully it wasn't too fast, and like Lori said, we are recording this, so you can go back and review it again. and review it a few times if I've gone through it a little bit too quickly. But it's a lot of information to cover, and that's kind of why I didn't want to take on too many quality processes in a 30-minute demonstration, because it's a lot. Quality is a big subject, as most of you guys probably already know if you're here and you work in quality. So just to kind of to finish up here, so what are some of the things that our customers get by putting in a PLM system? Okay, not even just around quality, but just in PLM in general, because as you'll see in the next slide, we can manage a lot of different processes. But reporting is huge. That's a big thing, right? I mean, management always wants to know what's going on in their business and in their organization. Process status checks. You've seen that. We can validate a process. We can enforce the process. What's really nice is we can change those processes. So if we find that, hey, we need to modify our auditing process, we can easily go into the system, add another workflow state, redirect a few arrows if we need be, and boom, it's up and it's live and it's out there. And by putting in those notes that I showed you, we maybe don't even need to retrain people, okay? But that's a whole other subject. We've done a whole bunch of workspaces around training. How do we manage our training records for users? It's another great use for PLM. If we get audited and we want to make sure that, how do we know that our users were trained on certain things? We can create training records and validate that they've received that training. Connecting your business processes and maybe to other systems. Fusion Lifecycle is very integratable into other environments. ERP is a big one that we integrate into. Maybe there's a QMS system. So maybe some of the QMS system software, or maybe a MES software or something like that, maybe is doing incoming receiving, your MES system is, and you're doing NCRs over there, that's fine. If you don't have a system today, we can certainly do NCRs. But if you do, we can connect to that, okay? Because the workflow engine inside of Fusion Lifecycle is just tremendous. And so when it comes to managing workflow, quite honestly, there's enough system out there that I've personally used that's better. Continuous improvement. So we have these processes. How do we improve our processes? Customers that aren't constantly improving, or businesses that aren't constantly improving their processes aren't growing, okay? And they're going to get left behind. So we need continuous improvement. Well, you need a system to manage that. And you need a system to roll those changes out. Fusion Lifecycle is a good example for that. No hardware, software, deploy and manage. One of the things I failed to mention is, again, it's software as a service. It's in the cloud. Autodesk updates this software on a continuous basis. About 4 times a year, they come out with new enhancements. So it's not a matter of, like in the old days, you implement an ERP system and every 5 or 6 years you might do an upgrade because of the cost and the amount of effort to do that. You get no new functionality every 5 or 6 years. With Fusion Lifecycle, you get new functionality multiple times throughout a year, okay? And it's free. It's there for you. I mean, it's just done automatically. We can be up and running within weeks with a few workspaces, with a few workflows, okay? And it goes across a lot of business processes. And we've seen customers that have used this in areas that we would have never thought of, and it works for them, because every part of your business has workflow. Every part of your business has processes. It could be HR. It could be, your legal team. They have processes. Those things can all be managed within Fusion Lifecycle. Some of the other areas that we see or that we've worked in with our customers, again, we talked about quality, items and BOMs, bills of materials and items. I mean, that's very core to any Fusion Lifecycle. Typically where we start with most customers, because, you kind of, that item record, it's all tied to that, as you kind of saw. But now in this case, if we're just auditing our processes, we could start right there, right? But different things have, kind of different prerequisites, and we can help you with that. Change management, another big one. Change orders and change notifications and ECRs, every customer is a little bit unique in how they manage change, okay? And the workflow engine here can accommodate those different uniquenesses, which is nice, because some of the systems that I've used and probably you guys have used, you get a fixed workflow and you're like, hey, here's what you get. You got to live with it. This gives us the ability to really tailor these workflows around what your business needs. And that's what I have for today.